However, diversity and intensity are important, and these are linked. By diversity, we might think of mixed use, but we also may think of visual diversity, visual interest. There's no simple formula. We need visual diversity, we need diversity of activity for vibrancy and to provide people with choice of environment. Some of you might know Richard Sennett. He's an urban sociologist or know his books, and he writes about what cities offer, the fact that they offer the unexpected, the chance of the chance encounter with something you never expected to find, exposure to people and events which you never planned to see, but they happen and they add to life, the unknown and the unpredictable. So what does this mean for design? Well, mixed use and responsiveness to change, and you'll find I deliberately used this image of Cuba Street, or in fact Cuba Mall in Wellington, to illustrate this. Here we have, at one end of the street, we have the cultural centre of Wellington, the Town Hall, the Michael Fowler Centre. At the other, or 2/3 of the way up, we have the School of Architecture, a major cultural centre, and then Massey University a little bit further. So there's an educational function, a cultural function, there are office functions all the way around here, and a lot of people living there. And it's an incredibly vibrant place, and you get the retail, all the service facilities, the little 4-square stores, and so on to make it work. Now we can say that all of this is important, but this might maybe be seen just as opinion. Now I did some work on the tank farm, Wynyard Quarter, during the plan change, where I looked at calculating what is the real impact of increasing residential density. We know it sort of provides better public transport and people have to have fewer cars and so on, but how does that, what are the numbers? Now, of course, the context of the Wynyard Quarter is there was opposition to it from people primarily around St Mary's Bay, about a kilometre away, who were concerned about the scale of buildings perhaps obscuring some of their views. My view on that is, if you can't intensify in the Wynyard Quarter, within walking distance of Queen Street in the central city, where can you do it? And in fact, the buildings aren't really very high anyway. Now, used an American tool developed by the San Francisco League of Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club, both in the USA, to give an indication of the impacts of different densities. So, can you read that at the back? You probably can. Now, what I did was look at different development types. I calibrated this to New Zealand conditions. Now, I know from the work I did on the value of urban design that the assumptions behind this, and I checked them very carefully, apply also to New Zealand. And we see some extraordinary things. You know, obviously, land use is now, I also apologise, this is all done in American, something I'm very familiar with, acres and miles and so on, but that's not the current measurement. But land used per 1,000 households, obviously you use a heck of a lot more land if you go to low density, that's obvious. But let's just look at what happens with transit service, public transport. If you have 150 households per residential acre, that's high-rise apartments, like you might find in a big American city. You get, on average, 395 buses per hour. If you have low-density peripheral development, that is something like we might get on the outskirts of Auckland or Wellington or Christchurch or anywhere else, there are no buses. And you can see the variation between average numbers of vehicles per household. Let's not go to the extreme, let's go to even 20 households per residential acre. Half as many vehicles per household as for the low-density stuff at the periphery. If you go even higher density, well, you have a fifth of the number of vehicles. And of course, all of that flows through into the emissions and so on and energy use. Vehicle costs. What's the cost to households of having to live in certain situations, just purely of running the car? This is done on a Toyota Corolla, AA figures for petrol consumption and so on, and New Zealand petrol prices. You can see in the central city, it may cost $4,146, round figures, per household per year. Out in the periphery, $17,751. That's by a factor of 4.3. It's a lot. So there is a major difference. You know, density offers real benefits if there is good design. Now that's the challenge. The buildings have to be, the environment needs to be well designed, the public environment needs to be well designed. And if you can make that work, there are huge, huge benefits. How am I going, Patrick? That's good, because I'm nearly done. Now, the city is a never-ending work in progress. Now, I showed these examples perhaps to be provocative, because urban design is not big architecture. This sort of major redesigns, Brasilia was built, but Hilbersheimer's project was not, neither was Paolo Soleri's ecology projects. We see a population of $550,000 in a single building in what looks like a cooling tower. Those sorts of projects require totalitarian power. They just don't happen in the real world. But we also know that Daniel Burnham wrote, "Make no small plans." He was saying, look at the big vision. So there's an element of that. It's a very compelling sentiment. But there's a problem if there's a big idea that has to be realised and it's not capable of change and adjustment, and everything looks the same. You get gigantism, as we see there. You get coarseness. You get loss of user control over their environment. You get lack of choice of environment. It's monotonous, it's boring, and it's simply over-planned. So it's getting the balance right. So instead, a richness of fine detail and adjustment to specific circumstances is desirable. And I refer back to Jane Jacobs again. I was over in New York only 6 weeks ago, and I even pictured Jane Jacobs' house on the left there. She made a case for fine-grained gradual change versus the opposite of cataclysmic change, incrementalism. Now, what makes a great city or urban neighbourhood or town centre? Well, it's the ability to constantly review and adjust and build in accordance with the conditions that are found, building on the best of what's there, fine-grained interest, social continuity. Urban renewal causes real problems, so that really happens these days. And retention of existing fabric gives diversity and a varied rental profile, which allows new businesses that can afford only low rents, and people that can afford only low rents to live there, work there, as opposed to everything being new, brand new, requiring a lot of financial resources to be involved. Now, having said that, it is possible to design a new city district from scratch and achieve some of the positive qualities just talked about. Potsdamer Platz in Berlin, I think, gets it right. With reference to Daniel Burnham, it is not a small plan. So this is seen by some as the centre of the European economy. Sony is on the left, Daimler-Benz on the right. Here we have a master plan following more or less the plan of critical reconstruction and projects by a whole range of architects. So we get the coordination, but we also get the diversity. Now, this was on a site which was grass with rabbits running around on it, some of it in the no man's land behind the Berlin Wall. And so it's been built over about 10 to 15 years. We see some of the diversity of buildings on the left, the one with the angled facade by Richard Rogers, the terracotta one by Renzo Piano, the wonderful curved, tilted, twisting lawn. Another shot of that on the left, some of the fine detail, quite simple but amazing. These giant seesaws, 20-metre seesaws. I know I stepped them out, and after dark I went back there with my kids and actually tried them out. Just magic, quite memorable. But contributing to the environment, which is buildings and public space. And here's the street system. It looks like an established city street. It's got a richness, a level of detail and consistency, which fits very well in that environment, which gives a real quality.